The New York Post this week reports some major breaking news. You are basically a crackhead, and so am I, it would seem. Everyone is a crackhead. The world is full of crackheads, which on second thought might not come as news at all, though the reason may be a bit of a surprise. It turns out that if you really enjoy eating potato chips, and if you struggle to stick to the serving size on the nutrition label, then you are an addict. And of course, everybody struggles with that because, frankly, the serving sizes are a joke. If you look on the back of your bag of Lay's barbecue chips, it will tell you that the suggested serving size is like 1 chip per person per week. But if you struggle to keep your consumption down to that level, you might as well be shooting up heroin, according to the science. The New York Post reports the news with this headline, quote, "Ice cream and potato chips are just as addictive as cocaine or heroin." Research. That's according to research. Research says that. Reading on, "Can't put down that bag of potato chips? Science says it's not you, it's the junk food. Ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, are just as addictive as nicotine, cocaine, or heroin. Experts say, and more than 1 in 10 people are hooked. A new analysis of 281 studies across 36 different countries have uncovered that a staggering 14% of adults are hooked on UPFs. The finding is shocking, given that UPFs, think sausage, ice cream, biscuits, soft drinks, sugary cereals, have previously been linked to cognitive decline, cancer, psychological distress, and even an early death. The analysis was led by University of Michigan professor Ashley Gearhart, who previously created the Yale Food Addiction Scale by applying the same criteria that experts use to diagnose substance addiction. The criteria includes uncontrollable and excessive consumption, cravings, and continued intake despite potential negative health effects. Quote, "The combination of refined carbohydrates and fats often found in UPFs seems to have a supra-additive effect on brain reward systems above either macronutrient alone, which may increase the addictive potential of these foods," Gearhart and the study's authors wrote in their new findings published in the BMJ. Well, we're then told that scientists want a cigarette-style warning label on processed food, cautioning the poor, addicted, helpless consumer that the ice cream he's buying is unhealthy and won't help him achieve his weight loss goals. This is necessary, they say, because the food is addictive, just like heroin and cocaine. Which is, of course, why our streets are riddled with homeless bums whose lives have been destroyed because of their junk food addiction. You know the stories. First a guy buys a pack of Oreos, and next thing you know, he's robbing a Cold Stone Creamery and stealing the ice cream, not the cash. In fact, they even made a movie about a man's plunge into ice cream addiction. It was called Requiem for a Cream, which is a joke that I saw on Twitter, but I wish I'd thought of myself. Anyway, this is a real issue, is the point. That's why junk food withdrawal can be so severe. You go to your pantry, find out that you're out of Pop-Tarts, then you start sweating, you have chills, a fever, you begin vomiting, you're on the ground shaking, having a seizure. Many people have died from Pop-Tart withdrawal, because it's just like being addicted to heroin. Exactly the same. I recently read a story about a woman who turned to prostitution just to feed her Pringle addiction. Pringle prostitutes, they call them on the streets. Pringle-toots, in fact, is the word. You can find them on the same street corner as the donut dealers selling black market Krispy Kremes to a bunch of strung-out junk food junkies. Again, this is all very real, except for the fact that it's entirely made up. And we've talked before about the modern propensity to avoid personal responsibility and deny free will by turning everything into an addiction. There are many made-up addictions that these days, but none of them are as absurd as food addiction. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right now, food addiction is not a thing. You are not an addict. You're just a glutton. And despite what psychologists who want to medicalize every human vice or virtue might claim, gluttony is not the same thing as addiction. Now, how do they justify inventing this food addiction concept? How do they know that food is addictive? I mean, how do they distinguish someone who eats junk food because it tastes good and they like it from somebody who eats junk food because they have a medical addiction? Well, there seem to be 2 reasons typically given. And the first is the bit about reward systems in the brain. An article in Healthline about food addiction puts it this way. When acting on cravings, the brain gets a reward, a feeling of pleasure associated with the release of dopamine. The reward is what cravings and food addiction are all about. People with food addiction get their fix by eating a particular food until their brain has received all the dopamine it was missing. And this is how it always goes, right? Anytime somebody wants to justify a newly invented addiction or mental illness, they talk about brain reward systems and dopamine and so on. And they expect us to just accept it because it sounds super science-y. But if we use our minds, we might start to question this logic. And for one thing, your brain is supposed to have a positive chemical response to food. We are wired that way for a reason, mainly so we don't starve to death. Junk food has lots of fat and sugar, which are things that your body needs and craves. And that's why people like to eat it, because that's why your body rewards it. Your brain gives you a pleasurable chemical response to those things because you need those things. Now, it's true that junk food has too much fat and too much sugar and the wrong kinds because they're all processed or ultra processed, apparently. But your brain responds positively to it anyway because it tastes good. The taste is pleasurable, and that's why people eat more of it than they should. It's really not any more complicated than that. Okay, we don't need 300 studies into it. Why do people like to eat potato chips? I can't understand it. Why do people eat chocolate chip cookies? Why do people like to eat cake? Because it tastes good. That's why they eat it. That's it. That's the only reason. End of discussion. In fact, this is the essential reason why people do every bad or unhealthy thing that people do. They do it because it gives them pleasure. They do it because of the brain's reward systems. That is the fundamental carnal motivation that lies behind literally all bad self-destructive behaviors. So if this is a reason to call junk food an addiction, then all bad behaviors are addictions. Anything that a person does that they know they shouldn't do, but they do it anyway because it feels good, is now an addiction. So everything from eating a bag of Doritos to procrastinating on a school assignment to calling in sick to work when you're not really sick to robbing a bank or having an affair, all bad things, big and small, all of them are addictions. People do them because they derive some kind of pleasure from doing them. If they didn't derive pleasure from it, they wouldn't do it. They do them because, in Healthline's phrasing, they get a feeling of pleasure associated with the release of dopamine. Okay? It's not, people talk about dopamine like it's some sort of magical elixir. Oh, well, there's dopamine, so that must mean it's some kind of medical thing. No, that's it. It's just you like it. That's all it means. Since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the left has completely lost their minds, making abortion their official sacrament. Meanwhile, pro-life efforts, which are now more important than ever, are booming. Despite the narrative, pro-lifers have not gone away. They've increased in number. In fact, as one of the largest pro-life organizations in the world, no one's in a better position than 40 Days for Life to end abortion state by state. 40 Days for Life is changing hearts and minds in the most blue pro-abortion states where it is most necessary. With 1 million volunteers in 1,500 cities, 40 Days for Life holds peaceful vigils outside abortion facilities. You can help their volunteers fight ongoing legal battles to protect free speech for their volunteers by giving a tax-deductible gift of any amount at 40daysforlife.com. That's 40daysforlife.com. If this is reason enough to justify classifying food as an addiction, then it's reason enough to justify all vice, all sin, all bad habits, all bad choices as addiction. The same logic applies to all of them with no exceptions. Now, we'll be told that there's a difference, though, here, because an addicted person is so enthralled by the chemical reward that they can't help themselves. A different Healthline article on food addiction quotes a psychotherapist who says this: if you can't stop yourself from eating something, overeat, or if you find yourself being secretive about eating something, or even have a withdrawal, such as feeling sick or having blood sugar imbalance, that is an addiction. If you can't stop yourself, it says. Well, how does that work? Is there some kind of mystical, unseen force compelling you against your will to stuff a chocolate chip muffin into your face? The guy going back for his fourth helping at Golden Corral can't stop himself? He has no free will at all? What is he, possessed? Is he inhabited by some kind of fat demon who loves fried chicken? Really, what do you mean he can't stop? Here are some things that I can't stop doing, okay? I can't stop being 6 feet tall. I can't stop being someone who was born in 1986. I can't stop obeying the law of gravity. These are all things I literally cannot stop doing no matter how hard I try. Does the Golden Corral buffet fall into this category for some people? Is it like gravity? Is it an inevitability? Is it a thing that exerts control over them? So that while they're walking to the buffet, if you tried to talk to them, they'd have this glossed, glazed look in their eyes, and it's like there's zombies walking towards. Are they like moths flying into the porch light? No, of course not. I mean, they might look like it and act like it, but that's not really what they are. The food addict can stop eating. He can eat healthier. He can put down the fork. He can put down the tray. He can put down the bag of chips. He can. He just doesn't want to. He's not forced to eat. He just really, really wants to eat. And he does the thing that he really, really wants to do, even though he knows he shouldn't, because he is weak and he has very little self-control. He could have more self-control if he put effort into it, but he doesn't feel like it. It's a character flaw. It is a moral defect. One of his own making entirely. There's nothing medical going on here except his hypertension. There is no medical addiction, though. There's no overwhelming compulsion that overrides his free will. So why do we really have this concept of food addiction? Where did it really come from? Well, that same Healthline article that I mentioned earlier provides the real answer. The chief medical and clinical officer at something called the Eating Recovery Center is quoted as saying this, quote, "In my experience, some affected people find the term food addiction validating, empowering, and useful for their recovery." There it is. Food addiction may not be an accurate concept. It may not be true, but it is validating. It is useful. It is empowering. Why? Because it makes the glutton feel better about his gluttony by pretending that it's not his fault. It gives him an excuse. He's not the one in the Dairy Queen drive-thru. That's his addiction. His addiction is doing all that. His addiction is to blame. Now he gets to drink the milkshake without any of the guilt, though he still gets all of the diabetes because he can't pawn that off on his addiction, especially because it doesn't exist. And that is why food addiction is today canceled. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.